Warm welcome to you from Geneva, Switzerland. I'm Rida Sadki from the Geneva Learning Foundation. As you can see, we have a special session starting in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you just saw the notification in your Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever you may be, a warm welcome to you. Stick around. We're going to be starting this session on communication in the digital age, and we're here with Mike Hanley, who's spent some time in the content mines over the last 30 years and has accepted the invitation to share with you some of his insights. And this time you'll see in about 4 minutes we'll kick off, and you'll see this is going to be about your real world challenges. Every participant in this special session has had the opportunity to actually submit a challenge, a dilemma that you actually faced with respect to digital communication, and we'll be selecting some of them, maybe not all, and discussing them with Mike Hanley. So see you in 3 minutes, 40 seconds. And if you're listening to the podcast, you may want to, on your podcast player, just skip ahead. This will be music in the next 2 minutes or so, and then we'll get started. See you soon. We're 2 minutes and about 10 seconds away from kicking off this special session with Mike Hanley about communication in the digital age. So he is the award-winning Chief Executive Officer of the Content Engine. You're going to get to know him in about 2 minutes. Stick around. We'll be talking about communication, and we'll be actually workshopping your dilemmas, your challenges that participants, everyone who registered for this event had a chance at submitting their challenge. If you're here in our Zoom studio, you'll also get to share firsthand with Mike. See you in about 1 minute, 40 seconds. All right, good morning, evening, afternoon from Geneva, Switzerland. I'm Reda Sadki from the Geneva Learning Foundation. A warm welcome to you for this special session. Mike Hanley is our guest. He accepted our invitation. He has over 30 years in digital communications. He's gone from the sunny mountaintop of Davos all the way to the darkest pits of the content mines. Now, since December 2018, Mike has been building the Content Engine, a company whose mission is to be the world's most advanced content agency, combining technology and creativity for effective communications. You're going to hear firsthand what that actually means. Mike, how are you doing? A warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Reda. Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. Great to have so many people here with us today.
All right, wonderful. Now, before the Content Engine, you were the head of digital communications at the World Economic Forum for 9 years, and you built the organization's social footprint into the hundreds of millions. You and your team won, in fact, the European Media Communication Association Digital Communications Team of the Year in 2018. Now, the reason we invited you, Mike, is because all organizations struggle with digital communication, and making an impact is hard. Now, we're going to be exploring 5 themes today, and I'm going to put them up on the screen here. Everything from generating strong content ideas all the way to tools to improve digital communication operations. Now, these themes were selected by Mike, and we invited you to share your challenges, the dilemmas that you are facing, and we're going to be exploring these themes today. Now, we actually weren't sure who would come to an event like this one. It turns out that most of you are not communication specialists. Instead, you work in a range of fields from global public health to education. Now, Mike, you reviewed the challenges that were submitted by participants. Was there anything that surprised you? Tell us about it.
What surprised me was how consistent the challenges are, and actually consistent with what we see every day with the organizations that we work with and in our own work, that people who work in communication struggle with the same things. It's not a hugely diverse set of challenges. They are, however, knotty ones. So looking forward to addressing them today.
All right, great. We have online with us. We're also live streaming this across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. So I want to say hello just to a few of the people who are following online. To Taye Girma. Taye, please tell us what city and country you're connecting from. Amel Altahir from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Endayewo Iwat from Abuja, Nigeria. And Deepak Kumar Patro from India. As you can see, this is quite international a gathering. So let's now go dive in. And if you submitted a challenge and you are in the room, please check that your microphone is working, because we are going to call on you to tell us more. That's really the point, is to get that direct dialogue with those of you who have made it to this event. Now, Mike, we're also going to draw on the challenges you faced, and I'll be asking you to recall specific incidents, that a time when something happened, and then we'll grill you with 10 questions, which you can see here. Everything from how did you identify the problem to who or what triggered the learning, how did it turn out, what surprised you, and then we'll be asking you to share your own experience. Now, are you ready?
I'm ready as you are. Yeah. I'm really enjoying the tunes.
All right. So let's go with generating content ideas. And Mike, I want to start here. So we live in this world of content abundance. So you've got, and the question is, how do you get your organization's content to stand out? And does quantity trump quantity in today's world? What's the short answer to that question?
The short answer is that good ideas are the foundation of any kind of content strategy. Anything you want to achieve with strategy is about idea. Anything you want to achieve with content is going to come from ideas. And so taking ideas and the generation of ideas seriously is actually the core of any kind of success, digital communications foundation success. And so what we're going to talk about today is how you can actually integrate the generation of ideas into your operations as a serious thing that the team does every day.
All right. So, Mike, you had a great case study about your experience with the World Economic Forum, the WEF. We shared it with all the participants ahead of the event. And in this case study, you tell the story of how you really scaled up the digital communication of the World Economic Forum. And you point to this inflection point when you and your team ramped up just the sheer volume of content you were pumping out via the WEF's websites and social media channels. And I'd like to ask you, what are the key lessons you learned from that? What must have been a pretty intense period? And then I've got some questions for you.
Oh, the key lessons. Okay, so the key lessons are that where content is concerned, it's a continuous process. You can't just say we did content last week, or we did that. It's the audio. Half-life on any content that you produce is really short, and so the art of a successful content strategy or a successful digital communications operations is to have a continuous news operations like team that works in a news-like fashion. So you're coming to the table every day, you're discussing ideas, you're seeing how the work in progress is progressing, and you're seeing what did well, what didn't do well, and you're consistently analysing the performance of what you did so that you can get better in the future. And that's the basic lessons that we learned and the basic lessons that we try and teach organizations that we work with now.
All right, so here are some questions for you. So let me just bring here. What led to that? There had to be a decision point where you said, okay, let's scale up the volume of content we're pumping out. How was that decision made? What were the risks that you considered? And also, what were the costs?
Yeah, so it was a top-down decision. We had a meeting one day where we decided that in 3 months' time we were going to publish. At the time when the day when this meeting happened, we were publishing maybe 3 or 4 pieces of content to our blog each week, and they were of middling quality. It was, the World Economic Forum's blog at the time was a dumping ground for marketing articles and bits that people had submitted, partners had submitted for publication, and it was just a bit of it didn't have a strategy. And we decided the strategy was going to be high quality, high volume. And at this meeting, we decided that in 3 months' time, we were going to publish not 3 pieces a week, as we were doing at the time, 45 pieces a day. And that in 1 month's time, we'd be doing 15 a day. And the month after that, we'd be doing 30 a day. And the month after that, we'd be doing 45 a day. We never got to 45. We did, however, get to 25 or 30 articles a day that are published on the World Economic Forum's website. And that remains the case to today. If you go to the forum's website, you'll see 25, 30 fresh pieces of content a day. How did we do that? Well, we found some growth hacks. One is that many platforms allow you to repost their content if you ask, particularly if you are a not-for-profit organization like many of our participants here today represent not-for-profits. You will find that there are many different websites and outlets and newspapers who will allow you to repost their content for free with a fresh headline, some fresh pictures, fresh captions, maybe an infographic, maybe shareable, that will help that piece perform better on your website than it did perhaps on the original website. So,
all right. What we want to know is Mike, is this still the best strategy today? How in today's world, you're talking about 2018, that's like the Jurassic era for digital.
That was 5 years ago.
5 years ago, yeah.
That was even. So the short answer is yes. You you will only make an impact in digital communications if you are consistently there in front of your audience. And there are lots of questions about what's the right volume of content to publish on Facebook, or can you publish 5 times a day to Facebook, or can you publish 50 times a day to Facebook? Can you publish 12 times a day to Twitter, or 100 times a day to Twitter? And the way you can answer that question is to do it, to do controlled experiments and find out what works for your audience. And it'll be different for every organization. So my recommendation is take 2 weeks, see if you can, line up 20 pieces of content a day for 2 weeks and see how it goes in terms of impacting your audience. So in short answer to your question, Betta, is the volume strategy does it still apply? And the answer is absolutely it does. And the reason is simple, is that if you are in front of your audience frequently, they trust you more, they read your stuff more, they share your stuff more, they understand what your story and message is more. That's why I'm always talking about volume, and volume with quality.
All right. So now we want to get personal, Mike. I'd like you to think about an incident. We're talking about generating strong content ideas, and it's the first of 5 topics we're going to try to get to in today's special session. And so what we want to know is when you faced a dilemma about generating a strong content idea, and we want to know what happened and ultimately how it turned out, and how you thought through. It's a thought process with respect to that dilemma that is also of interest to us.
Yes. So, well, if you can imagine that publishing 25 pieces of content a day, your idea pipeline runs dry pretty quickly. So actually the challenge is less about the challenges, there are numerous challenges involved in a volume strategy like that, but ideas is one of them. So we came to a point where it's just like, how are we going to generate all of these ideas? And we came up with, so we put that to the team. How are we going to generate the number of ideas that we need to? And the team came up with a bunch of solutions. First of all, we have regular ideation sessions where we sit down and we think about using inclusive brainstorming ideas. We actively come up with dozens of ideas in an hour. So if you have 5 people sitting, if you have your team sitting around the table, 5 or 8 people, or however many there are in your organization, you sit them down actively for an hour and you say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a Google Doc or a Word document or however you want to do it. Just say, I want your ideas on this piece of paper. Within an hour, you will have 100 ideas. 50 of them will be worth looking at. 30 of them will be worth exploring a little bit more. 20 of them will be worth maybe writing a brief. And then you've got, 10 ideas, which are gold. And that took you an hour plus a little bit of incubation time. And there are, we started to gamify things. So people on the team who came up with the best ideas got a prize at the end of each month. We distributed the sourcing of ideas around the organization. So one of the things we did at the forum, and one of the things we continue to do now with our customers, is to provide a very simple form so that if you are surfing the internet and you see something that's interesting and stimulates you and you think would look good on your digital channels, you can click the URL, take the address of the newspaper story or the article or the video or whatever it is, put it into this form, and it gets submitted automatically into the list of ideas the team considers every day. So short answer to your question is take ideas seriously. It's a management challenge to get to actively squeeze out that number of ideas. Apply your idea generation capacity to the concept of generating ideas, and then make sure that you don't lose any once you've generated them all and that all ideas are considered.
All right. Thank you so much. Mike, we're going to get to the first challenge of this special session. But before we do that, I want to go to, to the folks who are viewing the live stream. So we've got, and we're not going to be able to greet everyone. So we've got Jacqueline Bucio, who sends her greetings from Mexico. Jacqueline, please tell us how are you involved in digital communication? What's your interest in this special session? And also maybe the city you're from in Mexico. We'd love to hear that as well. Tebo Charles signing in from Djibouti. Same question to you, Tebo. Karar Shah, Mohammed Imran Qureshi from Lahore in Pakistan. All right, and for Benjamin, oui, c'est uniquement en anglais aujourd'hui. It's English only. We apologize for that. And let's see, Emmanuel Chinoye Odunse is joining from Nigeria. Martha Ngoy from Cameroon. Gambo Isa Mohammed from Kano, Nigeria. Afia Nana from Allen, Ghana. Please do tell us city and country and tell us how you are involved in digital communication. What's your interest in this topic? Many of you, of course, are from our largest program, the immunization program. Many of you are busy fighting misinformation, figuring out how to communicate effectively to reach people with COVID-19 vaccine, to reassure families and caregivers about the safety and efficacy of vaccines. So probably there's certainly that interest. If you have questions, ask them. Let us know what's on your mind. Josephine from Nigeria, Anisha from Nepal, Tahir Abubakar, Rebecca from Nairobi, Kenya, Syed Abdu from Egypt. I'm hoping we'll see some communication specialists from Western Europe and North America at some point today. So now we're going to get to the very first challenge. And let's see, we've got challenge coming from Joanne, and let's see if there is a Joanne in the room. I'm hoping that if you submitted this challenge, yes, I see a Joanne. So Joanne, are you there? Are you in fact the author of this challenge? And of course, if you're not comfortable, if for any reason you don't want to speak, you can ignore my prompt.
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
Hi, Joan.
Hi. Yeah, so that's my challenge. I work for a consultancy, which is sort of similar to what you're leading with the content engine, just that we specialize on supporting faith-based organizations. And I am just starting the communication strategy to kind of showcase their services and the work that they've been doing. So my question is about, generating content for them. And I like what you mentioned about volume and ideas, but at the moment I am a one-woman comms team, and I'm wondering how to address that challenge of volume as well. Yeah.
Well, that's a challenge that many communicators in not-for-profit sector face, being kind of a one-man band. The challenge, can we put the challenge up again there, Rita? Because it's basically you want to generate ideas for how to show what the agency does. And we're the same. At the content engine, you'll see, if you look at our website, we have a blog. There are, 3 or 4 pieces on there at the moment. And the way we generate that, plus we post to social every day, a couple of times a day. And the way we address that is the same way that we would address the challenge for any customer. And that is, we have an ideation session once a week around what an ideation, for those unfamiliar with the term, means the creation of ideas. We have a session that is dedicated to generating ideas once a week. And at that session, we create an inclusive environment where all ideas are good ideas, people put the ideas in, and then we go through and talk about them and select them. Now, it may not be possible for you to do that if you're a one-man band, and then at the same time, Joan, I imagine that this is a task that has been given to you by the broader team. So perhaps reach out to them, say I've set up a session on Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, and what we're going to talk about is the ideas for our social channels, or ideas for our blog, or ideas for what's the best example of work that we have done, what is the unique way that our agency addresses content strategy issues that others don't, all of these kind of questions that will help you generate a plurality of ideas for the agency. Does that help?
Yes, yeah, that's helpful to know. Just one more question about determining, sort of like how executionable an idea is. What are sort of the parameters that guide that process?
Yeah, so the one, well, there are many benefits to a data-driven content strategy. One of the biggest one is you know what works and what doesn't work. And so if you put something out on your social channels and it performs really badly, don't do that again. Don't do something like that again. Look at what does well. Look at what does badly. Do more of what does well, and do less of what does badly. That's one way to do that. Second is, I mean, if you don't have that data because you haven't been publishing, then all you can really do is go with the stuff that is going to please you and your colleagues, because it gives you that kind of, yes, it represents the organization well. It shows it demonstrates our value proposition well. So you can go with that sort of stuff until you have enough data to start making decisions about what the audience really wants to see and what they don't want to see.
Okay, all right. So just still on the experimenting, like you mentioned, and trying out to see what works and what works best and what doesn't work.
Pretty much. I mean, if you put something together and you've got a really good feeling about it and you put it out there on your social channels and nobody responds, you have to examine your feelings and then redetermine your editorial strategy based on actually what's performing and what's not performing. Because the most complicated thing about digital communication strategy is knowing where to put your money, because the digital communications environment is bottomless. The budgets are not. So the reason why we are so concerned about using analytics to determine what performs well and what doesn't perform well is to make sure that we're not throwing good money after bad.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Mike. That's very helpful.
Thanks for your question, Joan.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Joan. And this is our first of hopefully several challenges we're going to be able to discuss. Now, Steve Podmore has posted a question. So he wants to know, is it possible to dynamically personalize content according to need, interest, focus, etc.? So this idea, I guess, is of people, an organization personalizing content for you versus you choosing what content you want to consume. I don't know if that's a helpful distinction. Mike is going to tell us because he knows.
Hi, Steve. Nice to have you with us. So the question is about, can you, Oh, hi, Steve. There you've popped up. Actually, can I? So you're asking about dynamically personalizing content. Can I ask you? Can you give us a little bit more context? What's your objective? Why do you want to do that?
Sure. Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, got you.
Great. Well, great session. Thanks for this. Just in terms of if there's not to overwhelm individuals, so giving them content that makes sense for them. So when I say dynamically personalized, I mean really the feed as opposed to very specific pieces of content. To give them access to everything, but what they can easily find is relevant to their needs, their interests, etc.
Yeah. So if you're talking about publishing content, the organization has stories that it wants to tell, and when we talk about publishing content, we talk about publishing we're publishing those stories, whether it's an article or a video or a gallery or a meme or a quote card or whatever it is that we're publishing. We're publishing these things in order to tell the organization's story and to communicate the organization's message. Now, when you publish stuff, the way it works is you publish stuff on your website and then you will promote that on social. Some stuff might go directly on social. A lot of it is designed to bring traffic back. When you publish stuff on social, on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever it is you're publishing stuff, the audience will get a subset of that content and will have the option then to, either visit the website, look for what they need, or look at your social feed, maybe a Facebook social feed or your Twitter feed, and get a much more comprehensive understanding of the stories that you are telling. So it's difficult to, unless you're going to target specific audiences using Facebook paid promotion or Twitter paid promotion, it's difficult to customize different content for different users. And that's why the volume strategy, in my mind, has always worked so well. Because if you have a volume, if you have a large audience, whatever it is, whoever it is you're looking to speak to, you will reach inside that audience. Whereas if you try and be so specific that you're excluding people from following you or hearing your stories or working with you, then you're cutting down your audience unnecessarily. So that's the way I address that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in what we're seeking to do, some sort of hybrid model would work, because I think the key is we don't want to really overwhelm people when we're operational with our model. But equally, we want to attract people in the first place, and that breadth, I think, can do it. But at the same time, people can be a bit nauseated by the volume of content. So I think for us, it's key just to make it specific, but not too narrow. Absolutely.
I get that. I get that question a lot in relation to a volume strategy. That don't people get sick of hearing from you? And the answer is no, because the only reason people are served your content is because they have interacted with it in the past, and it's very easy for people to mute you if they don't appreciate it. And they're only getting a subset of what you publish. It's not like if you publish, at the forum today, you go to their Twitter channel, you will see that yesterday they published 100 times to Twitter, and you didn't see hardly any of it because you only get a very small subset of what they publish, and it's tailored by the algorithm to your preferences. So my advice is always, and you would say that, but my advice is go for it. Publish as much as you can, because that's the only way you have a chance of reaching people.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Steve Podmore, for that great question. There's also Carmela Salzano, who says, are you using certain digital marketing principles to guide content creation, sprinkling in keywords that perform well in Google searches or on social media, using data to refine comms outputs? How far do you go down that road, Mike?
Well, that's a one-word answer, and that's yes. We do that. Whenever you're preparing a piece of content, you are looking to maximize the audience that's going to see it, interact with it, share it, love it, like it. And in order to do that, you need to understand what it is. The keywords, the keywords, the phrasing, the SEO that will maximize the value of that piece of content. So make sure that your headlines are SEO appropriate. Make sure that the stand first, which is the description of, in this article you will read about digital communications by Mike Hanley. You make sure that is maximized for search engines. You make sure that the first paragraph of your article is maximized for the keywords that reach your audience. And then in social posts, you're always optimizing for concepts, ideas, words, and terms that will get that content in front of your audience most efficiently.
All right, we're at the halfway mark, believe it or not, for this special session with Mike Hanley. We're talking about communication in the digital age. And we've got another challenge in relation to this question of the sort of figuring out what the good content is going to be. Unfortunately, Renee Tuning is not with us in the room, so I suggest we review it quickly, get an answer from Mike, and move to the next one. We've got a lot more to discuss, and I see several of you who did submit a challenge are with us. So sounds really interesting. Situation, organization, context. We work with a diverse group, including inmates, families, community, including victims, business, nonprofit, government, to facilitate successful re-entry into society from prison. So it's a complex social issue. I imagine there's a lot of stigma and other issues are involved here. Mike, I want to ask you, so if you're meeting Renee Tuning for the first time, what questions are you going to ask her to understand like what the situation is, and figure out what are some of the decision options that you might consider? At what point do you figure out like what does success look like for a communication initiative, digital communication built around such a sensitive, complex set of issues? And what's the worst that can happen if digital comms goes wrong on something like this?
Yeah. Okay. So the first point, Renee, is who do you want to reach? What does success look like? How big is the community that you want to build? What concepts do you want that community to understand? How much resource do you have to reach them? And what are the kind of, and this speaks to what's the worst that can go wrong? What are the kind of red lines? Where is it that we don't want to go? And with a topic like re-entry of inmates into the community, with a topic like that, you've got two things. One, you've got super rich well of stories. You will have dozens of personal stories about inmates and others who have had successful and unsuccessful re-entries from prison. And the question is, to what extent can we actually tell these stories, and how deeply are the members of that community willing to share their experiences in order to build that community? So that's one thing I'd like to explore. The second is, what are the tools, techniques, and processes that you as an organization use to help those individuals reintegrate and their families and communities? So here are three things to help former inmates should remember these three things when they are released from prison, or these five things. Families of former inmates tell us these five things are important are important contributors to enabling re-entry to society. Those kind of story ideas. So just to recap, one is, can we tell the stories of the individuals themselves and extract those lessons for the audience? And the second is, what are the lessons that we want to deliver directly to them, and can we do it in a format that is shareable, that people will appreciate, that is simple, and hopefully using those two techniques will get the messages across.
Great, thanks, Mike. We've got more folks joining online who've been saying hello. Please, I encourage you, don't just say hello. Tell us what city and country you're from, and tell us what communications challenge you have. Mike is really here to discuss with folks both from our immunization platform as well as digital comm specialists. Can you do that again, Mike? Yeah.
We're here to talk to your problem.
All right, so we've got, let's see, Rebecca Gathu from Nairobi, Kenya, Syed Abdu from Egypt, Abdel from Namibia, Caroline from Ghana, Martha, who loves this background music. It reminds her of many things on immunization when it comes to TGLF. Thanks, Martha. And who's struck by this idea of generating content. Maybe she can tell us more about that. Deepak Patro from India, apologies, says excellent presentation. Mamadou Hassan says bonjour. Jamila Hussein says greetings, also from Nigeria. And Lemon Kennedy, thanks to the organizers for the opportunity given me to be part of this webinar. What we want to know, dear Lemon Kennedy, is why is this an opportunity for you? How are you working on digital communications? Let us know in the comments. We are still very much looking at them. Now, we want to go to the next big topic, which is getting the organization behind the content strategy. So I suggest we dive right in. Let's see if we can get Alev. All right, she is not in the room, so we're gonna have to figure this one out without her, Mike. But I imagine in many cases, you don't have all of the information that you need to be able to sort of properly workshop or problem solve a situation. Here we know it's in Switzerland. It's about augmented reality, virtual reality, and something called the One Goal Initiative for Governance. And the challenge is you've got something that's new, complex, abstract, but vital, according to Alev, for organizations. But it challenges current assumptions of the target audience. I don't know if this is customers, if this is sort of mission-driven, whatever it may be. With very little information to go on, Mike, what would you want to know in order to be able to usefully advise? What comes to mind when you read this about, complex world, wicked problems that we face for those of us working on working in mission-oriented organizations? Where would you start with Alev? You're sitting with her knee to knee. What do you ask and why?
Knee to knee. I would be like, the first question I'd ask is, can I move to a socially distance?
Indeed.
Social distance from you. No, I think, okay, so most organizations, and I don't mean to denigrate Alev's challenge, most organizations have very complicated stories to tell. It's just the nature of the stories that organizations have to tell these days. So we work with Zurich Insurance, for example. They have an enormous story to tell about the critical nature of sustainability, about how organizations need to move to the future of work. There's a whole bunch of stuff around climate and climate change and how that impacts you as a policyholder. So there's a whole bunch of complicated challenges there. We work with the UN Office for Disaster Risk Resilience, reduction, for the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and it's all about how communities and cities and states can take actions to reduce the impact of disasters. Very complicated stuff. And so is obviously this, the AR/VR Meetup One Goal Initiative for Governance. Alev has stated it's a new, complex and abstract concept. So how do we go about telling all of these stories? And we touched on it just earlier. If you are telling stories at volume, you're telling stories in a very multi-dimensional way. And so you start with stories about how your ideas have impacted people or organizations in a practical way. This technology changed. This technology made us 10 times more sustainable, or these 3 suggestions turned us into a much better operational team, or these 5 tips will help you organize your household in a more efficient way. Whatever it is, if you're telling multiple stories from multiple different dimensions and you're telling them from the point of view of the organization, you have done the job of distilling down a complicated message into a series of simple ones. And let's face it, people don't have the time these days to sit around and analyze what it is you're trying to tell them. You might get 3 or 5 or 12 seconds out of them while they flick through your story on mobile phones or on Facebook, and you want them to understand what it is you're trying to get over to them in that time. So that's my answer to that particular question, is tell lots of stories about tell lots of stories that express your messaging, and that will help people understand what it is you're all about.
All right, we've got a follow-up question on the previous challenge from Renee, and it's actually Joan who wants to know what are some pointers you would give Renee in terms of changing the othering narratives around those who were previously incarcerated and are reintegrating, or in your comms work, there are often very sensitive issues, issues of stigma, how do you address those? How do they matter? How do you make sure that your team is aware of them, even if you're dealing with issues that no one in your team has personally experienced, for example?
Mm-hmm. So it's critical to understand the narrative that you're trying to shift. So you identify, say, the stigma that former inmates carry with them. And then is it possible to identify optimistic stories that you can tell that express how the narrative that your subject matter, the narrative that they carry with them, how it shifts that? Can you tell stories that show that former inmates are humans, build, become valuable members of their communities, contribute in the same way that people who are not former inmates do? So how can you actively change that narrative and do it through storytelling and tell those stories repeatedly? That would be my advice on that.
All right, we've got one more question. This one is anonymous. And this person wants to know, says, we're telling stories via Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. What other platforms do you think we can use to convey community and connecting our stories to them or with them?
So that's a super good question. And the answers are, well, let's face it, the main channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the Chinese social platforms and social platforms that proliferate in other parts of the world are important platforms for spreading our message. At the same time, you may well find that your own local communities, perhaps you create a WhatsApp group or a Telegraph group or other local, or perhaps you have a digital. Well, look at what the Geneva Learning Foundation has done through building. And in fact, Reddy, you might have some insights on community building at this level, because I know that your community of 40,000 plus immunisation professionals is one of the most astounding community building stories that I know. So perhaps let me throw that one to you, Greta. What are some of the tools and techniques that you use that aren't your basic social channels?
So yeah, one thing is, I mean, I guess this is not going to be news to everyone, but to anyone, but it's hard. I mean, for a small organization with limited resources, you can't just say, let's hire 10 guys from the BBC and let them, push out 25 stories a day. So you have to figure out how to use those very small resources, and make good use of them. And then it's the minutia, sort of every inch you gain. It's a kind of a war of position. It's like it's really slow, and at the same time, to my mind, it's about building momentum. So no matter how slow you're going, as long as you keep moving, as long as you're sharing stories and somebody somewhere is liking it, is letting you know, that signaling that they actually care and that what you've sent out, what you've shared is meaningful to them in some way, then you got to keep going. You got to keep going. And we have seen, we're in the thousands of people who are somehow, and then the other thing is just the level of digital literacy of your audience, I think, is another key consideration. So I'll stop there, but happy to engage. We also think about this from the learning perspective. How can education go beyond what communication does, not just tell the story, but get you to think about and reflect on, and maybe think about how you can change and what you can do and how you can take action in response to that story. So those are a few things that come to mind, Mike. But let's see if there are any other questions. Okay, and Caroline asks a question. I'm sure this is a recurring question you get. How do you attract traffic to your site and blogs? I suggest we come back to that one, because we have a challenge from Samuel Dodou, he's an executive director. What struck me is, and my first question to you, Mike, is, should an EXD, so the highest executive position in the organization, be thinking about this question? there's sort of, I can see two ways to respond. One is it's great if you've got somebody, a senior manager who's interested in the e-newsletter, and another person who could say, well, maybe this is not the best use or most strategic use of Samuel's time. What's your take? And in practical terms, what's your answer to this question?
Yes, so it's a shame Sam's not here because we could ask him a little bit more detail. Because it's hard to know whether the executive director should be thinking about this. Yeah, it's different if it's a massive organisation, in which case you would say to your communications director or manager, how are you building our community? Wouldn't necessarily say, are you doing e-newsletters, because that may or may not be the best way to build a community. But if it's a very small organisation and the resources are very limited, then creating and disseminating an e-newsletter may well be the best way to build the community that you're after. In a very practical way, it depends quite a lot. The success of a newsletter, and I've created and disseminated many of them. The ease of putting one together relies on two things. One, you template it in a way that is repeatable each time. So, and I'm terrible. I have my own e-newsletter that I put out irregularly on LinkedIn. Some of you may know.
No two issues of Mike's newsletter are the same.
Yeah, and so I'm terrible at templating it, but the easy way to do it if you're in an organization is to make sure that you have templated blocks. Up the top, we always have, a 50-word introduction from the executive director, and then we have 3 links to the blog posts from our website. And then we have, 5 links to the same, relevant content from our industry or from our partners. And then down the bottom, we have a sign up for a funny video or something like that, just so that each week the receivers of the newsletter and the producers of the newsletter know that they are doing and receiving the same thing. So that would be my first tip on that whole newsletter thing. And the second is make sure that you have lots of content to put in your newsletter. Otherwise both reader and producer are struggling.
All right, can we go back to Caroline Akosile's question? Her question is coming via LinkedIn, and she wants to know, I guess that's the sort of million Swiss franc question, is how do you attract traffic to your site or blogs? Maybe I can formulate it this way for you, Mike. What's different? What's changed in terms of how you get people to actually look at your organization's website or even your personal blog? What's different now than, say, 5 years ago?
So the truth is that not a lot is different now than it was 5 years ago. Because 5 years, what's different is the actual tactics. What's not different is the strategy. And so what I mean by that is strategy stay the same. You have to build your digital footprint. You have to build the number of people who follow you and understand you and are reading and sharing and loving and liking and proselytizing your stories on digital, and always link back to the website. So make sure that whenever somebody shares, there is a link that takes them to where you want them to be, which is on your website, if that's where you want them to be. There's a lot of argument about whether you care, whether people go back to the website or not. But if you do care, then make sure that you're always linking to it, and make sure that you are on social consistently.
All right, so here is the next challenge. This is from Trufosa Angici, who works at UN OCHA, so the United Nations humanitarian arm, let's say. So he is a communications professional, so public information officer in UN parlance, and would like to know how to ensure regular posting and scheduling of posts. How do we achieve consistency in posting quality content? How do we ensure that we remain relevant, visible, and informative?
Okay. So first of all, it sounds like the team needs to have a content strategy. And what I mean by that is you need to understand what it is that you want to achieve with your content activities. once you have an objective, we want people to understand. We want twice as many people to understand what Notch is all about in 12 months' time than understand what Notch is about today. And maybe you take a survey to get to know where that level is now, and then you'll understand what your objective is, which is to double your footprint. So you've got your big objective, then you've got your strategy. And your strategy is like, okay, in order to achieve our objective, we are going to post we are going to publish X number of stories on our website or our blog, and we're going to promote those posts on our social media channels X number of times each day on each social media channel. And then you've got your objective, which is to double your digital footprint and your voice. You've got your strategy, which is to use your website, your social channels to do this. And then you need to develop your tactics that support your strategy. And your tactics are, okay, we're going to structure the team like this. We're going to have regular editorial meetings, maybe once a day, maybe one Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, depending on what fits. And at those editorial meetings, we're going to take decisions about what blog posts we're going to publish, what social we're going to post, what partners we're going to promote, how we're going to build our community, do our community management amongst all of that. So the question is how to ensure regular posting and scheduling of posts. Well, the answer is you've got to have somebody who's in charge of that. That's their job. They do posting and they do scheduling of posts. How do we achieve consistency in posting and quality? You have somebody, that's their job, or a team, that's their job, and they understand clearly what quality means, what regularity means, and what posting means. Which channels are they posting to, and what do they say when they post to them? And so many organizations just simply have not tackled these questions in a systematic way. They give the social media or the digital communications to the intern and then expect that unpaid intern to do all the work, and then for it to continue after the unpaid intern has left the organization. And, they don't get the results.
All right. So you talk about basically building routines, building internal systems to push out stuff on a regular basis, for example. But then you also talk about building energy into your digital communication operations. Isn't that the opposite of a routine, which sounds kind of boring, even if necessary? What do you mean when you talk about building energy? What does that look like in practice? Sounds very vague and not sure I understand.
Yeah, so building, it's never easy. It is easier if there is a larger team. And it's easier if there is a larger team that understands what their roles and responsibilities are in this environment. So when things, if you have a team of 2 or 3 people who are all working on your digital communications, and they all know that they meet, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. and that the role, what they have to do is bring ideas to the table, feedback on the content that has been produced and will be distributed. That they are all buying into the mission. Energy is generated. Where energy gets dissipated is when it's not anybody's job, when nobody knows what their role or responsibility in the program is, when senior management only feeds back on negative things that happen rather than positive things that happen, and you get that kind of negative cycle of what are we doing here? We don't know what we're doing. Nobody's ever told us what, and you get a negative dynamic. But if you structure things right and you understand what you're doing in a very active way, then energy is generated. All right, so we have management.
Betty Nabate. So she works in the Ministry of Health. We don't know what her position is or the country, but it struck me that she said, she wants to know how to support her organization or program to set up a vibrant social media account. So that struck me. Okay, so that's just like energy. What does it actually mean? But more practically, what would be step one? You have Betty in front of you. socially distanced, your knee 2 meters from hers. What do you say? What's your advice?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, whose job is this? Yeah, and how much time do they have, and how much time do you have? Where does their job stop, and your job start? So, really super happy that we've got the job together to support this. And what does support mean? I mean, who's accountable for the success here? And is this just something that you're doing after work or on the weekends, which is fine, as long as we understand that, and whoever's relying on you for your support also understands that. If somebody's given you this, if this is your job and you've taken this on and you want to drive it forwards, then, okay, what social channels are we going on? Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, have we set them up? Do we have usernames, passwords? Where are those passwords kept? All these kind of tactical and operational things take up lots of time, and it's kind of take up lots of time, not complicated, however, critically important. And then questions like, what's the messaging that we're putting out on these social channels? What are the stories that we're telling? Is it about us as an organization and what we're doing? Is it about our place, our organization's place in the world? Is it about our senior executives and whose hands they're shaking? What is it that we're promoting here, and how, or what is it that what messages are we trying to disseminate, and how are we going to practically do that in terms of the content that we're posting every day?
All right, let's go to Anthony Lombardi. So Anthony works on HPV, so the human papillomavirus, global action based in Montreal and working remotely from Budapest. Anthony wants to know, how would you suggest approaching mobilizing governments through social media without, he says, rubbing them the wrong way? Anthony, tell us, what have you ever in the past rubbed a government the wrong way? Can you introduce yourself? Tell us more about your question, or what led to your question.
Yeah, so I'm the COO. Can you hear me properly?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm the Chief Operating Officer of HPV Global Action, and we're a registered charity. And we're trying to raise awareness of the importance of HPV prevention and vaccination. And one of the things that we do is we try to advocate for an increase in vaccinations available to Canadians, especially young Canadians in schools. So one of the things that we want to do, that we try to do, is to get the government on board. And what I'd like to know is, how do we, I guess, form this partnership of mutually interested parties through social media? And by rubbing them the wrong way, I guess I mean by getting them to understand the importance as much as we do.
Yes, tricky one. I think if you can give them formal ways to interact with you and simple ways. So how do they submit ideas to you in a way that they can see that their time has been, the time that they've taken, which could be 30 seconds sending an email to submit the idea, has borne fruit. So do they have formal and simple and easy to remember ways to submit ideas, to feedback on what you're doing, and to engage with you in that way? Does that sound like a helpful approach?
Yes, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I talked earlier about, we have a form that we distribute to, when we're working with our customers, we give them a form that they can fill in with ideas. And it's very simple. My name is Anthony Lombardi. My idea is to talk about this new kind of bandages. And here's a link to an article that I saw that is similar. And you press the button and in it goes to the team. And then the team can consider that idea and put it out on the social channels
and then the customer sees, or the people in the customer organization see that their effort in submitting an idea to you has borne fruit, and that it's worthwhile engaging with you, and that they get love from the digital environment when they do that, when they engage.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So that's one idea. I mean, basically, people will engage with you when, and we've got 1 minute left, so people will engage when they get rewarded. You know, it's like the mouse presses the pedal and he gets a pellet. You know, you want people to get rewarded when they engage with you. So what are the ways in which you can show people that you are giving them the love that they seek?
All right. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mike Hanley, for sharing a little bit of your 30 years of digital communications from the sunny mountaintop of Davos to the darkest pits of the content mine. Before everyone goes, do have a look. Let me see if I can, at the Foundation's podcast. It's a great way to just get the best of our live stream content. There's a range of topics that are covered. It's really crossroads for a new kind of dialogue. There'll be stuff like what we just did with Mike Hanley, with whom we are preparing a course on the topic of digital communication, a level 1 certification course using the Geneva Learning Foundation's unique learning approach. There's also a dialogue for learning and leadership, connecting global partners with local practitioners on issues such as the neglected needs of women's health. And then, of course, and there are many present today, and I want to appreciate the many people who are immunization professionals who are taking time out from their busy days to come in and listen to this event. I hope it was useful and will be useful to your work. And this is all on the podcast. If you want to know more about COVID-19 vaccine introduction, if you're a busy immunization professional, you want to stay current, you can tune in. But if you're not working in immunization, there's also content on the podcast that should be of interest to you. Once again, thank you for having tuned in. Thank you very much, Mike Hanley. And take care. We'll now do a quick rewind of the comments received during this special session. Thank you and goodbye.